Why would a wedding night, a moment of ultimate privacy, require an audience? In the cutthroat world of Renaissance Italy, the answer was power. The year was 1502, and in the heart of Rome, a grand spectacle was unfolding: the marriage of Lucrezia Borgia to Alfonso d'Este. But this was no love story. It was a cold, calculated political maneuver, a transaction where the currency was legacy and the collateral was a young woman's dignity. The opulent halls of the palazzo may have been filled with music and laughter, but beneath the glittering surface, a much darker drama was brewing, one that would demand a public performance of the most intimate act to prove a point to rival families and silence the venomous whispers that were the Borgia family's constant shadow. Rome itself seemed to pulse with a feverish anticipation. The air, thick with the scent of incense and freshly cut flowers, mingled with the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the murmur of gathered crowds. The city, a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and towering domes, had always been a stage for the mighty and ambitious, and today it held its breath. The setting within the palazzo was opulent beyond compare, a deliberate display of wealth and influence. Rich tapestries and gilded frescoes adorned the walls, while silver candelabras flickered with dozens of candles, casting a golden glow upon marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Servants in elaborate livery moved like silent ghosts, balancing trays laden with exotic fruits and spiced meats that glistened like jewels. This was the House of Borgia, and every detail was designed to communicate one message: unassailable power. At the center of this swirling vortex of splendor and scrutiny stood the bride, Lucrezia Borgia. At just 22, she was poised and regal, her delicate features framed by cascades of dark hair that contrasted sharply with the pale silk of her gown. To the assembled nobles, diplomats, and envoys, she was a symbol, a beautiful piece in a high-stakes game of dynastic chess. Her expression was composed, almost serene, but her eyes betrayed a complex storm of emotions: anticipation, apprehension, and a quiet, hardened resolve. She was the daughter of Pope Alexander VI, a man whose name was synonymous with both grandeur and controversy, and she was acutely acquainted with the burdens of expectation and the sharp edge of scandal. Her past was not a private memory but a public ledger of her family's ambitions. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza had been dissolved amidst brutal, publicly weaponized accusations of his impotence, a humiliation that stripped her of a husband and cast a pall over her personal honor. Her second, to Alfonso of Aragon, had ended in his violent and mysterious assassination, a death widely believed to have been ordered by her own father. These were not just personal tragedies, they were political events that had left indelible marks on her reputation, marks the Borgias were desperate to obscure with this new, grand alliance. Opposite her stood Alfonso d'Este, the heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. Tall and imposing, his demeanor was a mixture of solemn duty and restrained excitement. His lineage was ancient and noble, steeped in the traditions of northern Italy's ruling elite, and his court in Ferrara was renowned for its cultural sophistication, a stark contrast to the violent, scandal-ridden environment of Rome. He understood perfectly that this marriage was an instrument of statecraft, a strategic move designed to strengthen the Este hold on power, while extending the Borgia tentacles beyond the walls of Rome. His family, however, was wary. The Borgia reputation for cunning and ruthlessness preceded them, and the controversies that trailed Lucrezia like a shadow demanded assurances. This union was a gamble, and the Este family intended to ensure it was a winning bet. The ceremony in the resplendent chapel was a somber affair, the air thick with the scent of burning candles and myrrh. The officiating cardinal intoned prayers with measured solemnity, his voice rising and falling in the echoing nave. The congregation responded with reverence, though many eyes remained fixed on the bride and groom, measuring their poise, searching for any crack in their composure. As the formalities gave way to the wedding feast, the atmosphere shifted, but the tension did not dissipate. Tables groaned under the weight of delicacies: roasted peacocks adorned with their own feathers, platters of salted fish, and wine poured from ornate decanters that caught the candlelight like liquid rubies. The chatter of nobles filled the air, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and bursts of laughter that felt just a little too forced. Beneath the surface of this festive display, the real business of the day was being discussed in hushed tones. Courtiers exchanged furtive glances and whispered conversations, speculating on the implications of this union. For Pope Alexander VI, this was a masterstroke, a calculated effort to secure a powerful northern alliance at a time when the papacy's influence was both potent and precarious. For the Borgia enemies, it was a menacing expansion of their reach. And for Lucrezia, the day was a crucible. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, a smile etched on her face, aware of every gaze and every whispered comment. This wedding was not a contract of love, but a performance where every smile and gesture was laden with meaning. The political stakes were immense, and the pressure to present a facade of flawless legitimacy was overwhelming. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Rome's ancient stones, the grand feast began to wane. But the most critical part of the ceremony was yet to come. A quiet, unsettling expectation settled over the palazzo. The Este family's demand for undeniable proof of the marriage's consummation hung in the air, a grotesque requirement that reduced what should be a sacred, intimate act to a public spectacle. This ritual, rooted in the brutal exigencies of power politics, was designed to leave no room for doubt, no whisper of impotence or non-consummation that could be used to unravel the alliance later. The wedding night awaited, and it promised to be not a private beginning, but a final, humiliating act of political theatre, where Lucrezia Borgia's body would become the final document to seal a treaty written not on parchment, but on her very skin. The grand wedding feast, with its clinking goblets and forced merriment, was merely the prelude. As the last courses were cleared and the guests' smiles began to wane, a heavier, more unsettling anticipation settled over the palazzo. The political transaction of the marriage required its final, binding signature, not on parchment, but in the marriage bed. For the Este family, wary of the Borgia's notorious reputation and the scandals clinging to Lucrezia, a simple ceremony was not enough. They demanded irrefutable proof. The consummation of the union would not be a private act of intimacy, but a public spectacle, a ritual of verification designed to silence any future doubts about the alliance's legitimacy. The chamber prepared for this purpose was austere, despite its rich tapestries, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock the sanctity of the moment. The air in the room was thick and still, heavy with a tension that was both sacred and profane. The witnesses filed in with solemn faces, their presence transforming the private space into a political theatre. Among them were senior courtiers, trusted diplomats, and, most significantly, priests, their involvement lending a grotesque veneer of religious sanction to what was essentially a state-mandated violation. Their role was to serve as impartial observers, their eyes trained on the couple to attest that the act was completed, that the marriage was binding in the most physical sense, and that the Este lineage would be secure. For Lucrezia, entering that chamber was a walk to a different kind of execution. The rustle of her silk gown was the only sound, a fragile whisper against the crushing silence. Her composure, so carefully maintained throughout the day, was a thin veil over a profound and humiliating vulnerability. Her eyes, dark and reflective, held a complex storm of resignation and a quiet, simmering defiance. She understood with chilling clarity that her body was no longer her own. It had become a tool of statecraft, a sight to be scrutinized and verified. Opposite her, Alfonso d'Este's demeanor was a mixture of duty and palpable discomfort. Bound by the same ruthless expectations, he was a participant in this ritual, his role to publicly demonstrate his virility and commitment. The unyielding gaze of the witnesses, men who were his fathers, advisors, clerics in the service of God, violated the sanctity of the moment, reducing a sacred marital rite to a clinical political procedure. A silent understanding passed between bride and groom, a shared recognition of the ordeal imposed upon them by the unrelenting demands of power and dynasty. There was no tenderness in this convergence, only the cold mechanics of obligation. Then came the act itself, orchestrated with a chilling precision that stripped it of all humanity. The witnesses maintained their vigil, their collective gaze a physical weight upon the couple. Historical accounts would later chillingly note that the consummation was not a single event, but a performance repeated 3 times. This grotesque repetition was not about passion or connection. It was a deliberate, overbearing insistence, designed to eradicate any possible rumor of impotence or failure. Each repetition further blurred the line between intimacy and spectacle, hammering the point home to the watching world. The union was real, it was binding, and it was capable of producing the required heirs. The personal was utterly consumed by the political, the sacred made a servant to strategy. For Lucrezia, this was a profound violation, a brutal stripping away of privacy and agency. The marriage bed, a space traditionally reserved for tender union and vulnerability, was transformed into a stage for a humiliating performance. The psychological toll was immeasurable, a deep wound inflicted under the guise of necessity. Yet, it was in this furnace of humiliation that her resilience was forged. She endured not with passive submission, but with a steely endurance that masked a torrent of inner turmoil. Her ability to maintain her composure under such degrading scrutiny was a testament to a strength cultivated in a life where survival was synonymous with navigating the brutal calculus of her family's ambitions. The witnesses, particularly the priests, played their part with solemn gravity, their presence underscoring the era's complex fusion of spiritual authority and secular ambition. They were there to sanctify what was, in essence, a proof of physical consummation, intertwining doctrine with dynastic vigilance. This fusion made the ritual all the more invasive, as the eyes of God and man were invoked to legitimize a profound intrusion into the most private aspects of human experience. Outside the chamber, the court buzzed with speculation. The very necessity of such a public spectacle fed the gossip mills, ensuring that the Borgia name was once again on everyone's lips. The ritual, intended to quell doubts, paradoxically stoked the fires of intrigue, with courtiers eagerly dissecting its implications for the new alliance. When the final witness finally withdrew and the heavy door closed, the silence that settled over the chamber was deafening. The act had been completed, the alliance publicly and repeatedly sealed in a manner that left no room for legal or social challenge. The Este family had their proof. The Borgias had secured their alliance. But in the quiet that followed, the human cost was palpable. The wedding night of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este was a stark declaration of Renaissance reality, a world where the boundaries between the personal and political were not just blurred, but willfully erased. It was a moment where intimacy was sacrificed at the altar of power, and where a duchess began her married life not with a promise of love, but with the searing memory of a violation that would, ultimately, become the foundation of her legendary resilience. The journey from Rome to Ferrara was more than a change of geography. It was a passage from a world defined by Borgia scandal to one of Este sophistication, and Lucrezia seized it as her chance for rebirth. The humiliating public consummation, a ritual designed to break her spirit and brand her as a political object, had instead forged a steely resolve within her. She arrived in Ferrara not as a disgraced daughter, but as a determined duchess, understanding that true, enduring power in this refined court would be won not by the dagger's edge, but by the pen, the paintbrush, and the power of perception. The whispers from Rome still slithered through the marbled halls, but Lucrezia met them with a masterclass in reinvention, systematically building a legacy of cultural patronage and political acumen that would forever overshadow the sordid tales of her youth. Ferrara's court, a celebrated hub of humanist learning and artistic innovation, became the stage for her magnificent transformation. Lucrezia swiftly established herself as its luminous center, transforming her position into a platform of immense soft power. She became the patroness of a vibrant intellectual and artistic revival, hosting lavish salons that attracted the most brilliant minds of the era. Poets like Pietro Bembo and Ariosto found in her not just a benefactor, but a discerning critic and muse. Philosophers debated in her chambers, and musicians composed works for her pleasure. These gatherings were far more than social events. They were carefully curated theaters of influence. Within these rooms, buzzing with intellectual energy and aesthetic beauty, Lucrezia was no longer a silent symbol but an engaged, articulate participant. Her charm, wit, and considerable education disarmed nobles and scholars alike, fostering a powerful network of loyalty that proved more durable than any treaty forged by fear. In the glow of these salons, the ghost of her past was exorcised by the sheer force of her cultivated presence. Her patronage was both genuine and profoundly strategic. She commissioned artworks, tapestries, and manuscripts that celebrated the Este dynasty, cleverly weaving her own narrative into the fabric of Ferrara's cultural identity. Under her guidance, the court's reputation as a beacon of the Renaissance was not only maintained but elevated. She understood that a painting could assert legitimacy as powerfully as a papal bull, and a poem could secure her fame more effectively than any rumor could destroy it. Artists like Dosso Dossi and Titian received her support, their creations reflecting the sophisticated and intellectually charged environment she nurtured. This was a duchess building her monument not in stone, but in culture, creating a legacy that was both beautiful and unassailable. Politically, Lucrezia evolved into a canny and indispensable partner to her husband, Alfonso. Her unique lineage made her a crucial diplomatic bridge between the Papal States and Ferrara. Her extensive correspondence reveals a shrewd political mind, deeply involved in the intricate web of Italian alliances. She negotiated, mediated disputes, and leveraged her Borgia connections to secure military and economic advantages for Ferrara, all while skillfully distancing herself from her family's more sinister reputation. Her marriage to Alfonso, which began as a cold political calculation, matured into a partnership of mutual respect and shared ambition. While he focused on the mechanics of governance and defense, she mastered the art of influence, proving that a woman's power, though often exercised from behind the throne, could shape the destiny of a state as decisively as any duke's decree. Motherhood became the final, crucial pillar of her authority and legacy. Each successful birth was a public triumph, a political event that solidified the Borgia-Este alliance and guaranteed the dynasty's future. But for Lucrezia, it was also a deeply personal source of strength and purpose. She invested intensely in the education of her children, instilling in them the humanist values she so passionately championed. Through them, she ensured her influence would extend for generations, shaping the future rulers of Ferrara in her own image, cultured, intelligent, and strategically astute. Her children were the living, breathing proof of her triumph, not just over the humiliation of her wedding night, but over the very expectations that had sought to confine her. As the years passed, the narrative surrounding Lucrezia Borgia was irrevocably rewritten. The scandalous papal daughter was eclipsed by the revered Duchess of Ferrara. She became a patron of charitable causes, supporting convents and aiding the poor, further cementing her image as a pious and benevolent ruler. The grotesque spectacle that had once defined the beginning of her marriage was now a distant, shadowy memory, overshadowed by the tangible brilliance of her court and the stability of her rule. Lucrezia's story is a profound testament to the power of resilience and agency. She demonstrated that even when stripped of dignity and reduced to a political object, one could reclaim sovereignty through intelligence, grace, and an unwavering will. She did not escape her past. She transcended it, carving a place in history not as a victim or a villain, but as an architect of her own destiny, leaving a legacy written in poetry, art, and the enduring strength of a woman who turned humiliation into unparalleled influence. Thank you for watching. If you were fascinated by the true story of Lucrezia Borgia's resilience and power, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the hidden lives of historical figures. Don't forget to let us know in the comments which other misunderstood figures from history you'd like us to explore next.